Hello, everyone. I'm Janet Blount, a career coach who partners with elementary school principals and school counselors to create career awareness activities for elementary school students. Today, I have Kris Hanks, an integrated curriculum specialist for the Arundel County Public School System's Triple E program. Triple E stands for Enhancing Elementary Education. She was also the 2012 recipient of the Presidential Award for Excellence in Mathematics and Science Teaching. Ms. Hanks will provide tools and strategies to help Career Day speakers deliver informative and engaging presentations to elementary school students. Ms. Hanks, thank you so much for joining me.
I'm happy to be here. We appreciate the work that you're doing, and we always appreciate anyone who's willing to come in and talk to young people.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, let's just jump right in. Okay. My first question is, what is the appropriate length for a career discussion for elementary school students? And should it vary based on grade level?
I would offer that 30 minutes is a good guideline for young students. And within that 30 minutes, if you're somebody who's designing the talk or designing the experience, imagine chunking that time a little bit too. So for kindergarten through second grade, generally the listening span, the time is going to be somewhere around like 5 minutes. So if you have a lot to say, you're going to want to say that in a 5-minute window, and then sort of imagine a pause to look at something or to ask some questions, or just a moment for the kids to process. So a little bit of chunking of the time. If you're working with intermediate, which is grades 3, 4, and 5, you probably can talk for a longer span of time, maybe up to 10, but then also imagining some chunks and spaces in between those longer spans of talking.
Now, you mentioned chunking and then showing something. Just wondering, is PowerPoint presentation appropriate for elementary school students for Career Day?
Yes, and is
Okay.
my answer.
Okay.
And slides or those sorts of things. What I usually recommend to anyone who's coming in to talk, slides are helpful as long as they are 90% visual. So photos of you at work, images, maps, those sorts of things, highly visual things that would get the kids curious about what you're talking about. What I think sometimes as adults we make the mistake of doing is putting our script on the slide. So these are all the things I want to say, and I might have 8 bullet points on a slide. That is not engaging for a young person. One, if you're with primary students, they're not reading the slides with you. For older students, 3 through 5, it's just an opportunity that you want them listening to you. So as the speaker, you want them focused on you. So I've had a pilot come in before to talk to the students, and he brought lots of pictures of the inside of the cockpit and underneath the plane, and of maps and things that he used. And that got the kids really excited and actually offered a lot of questions, a lot of opportunities for them to get curious about what he was talking about. So yes, slides are great. I would say 90% photos, images, clip art, those sorts of things that the kids will help them visualize what you do versus a script for you to read.
Now, are there some careers that would be suitable for the younger children as opposed to the older children? Like, for example, you mentioned the pilot.
Yeah.
Would that be appropriate? Yeah, the kindergartners, first graders, second graders compared to the third, fourth, fifth graders. Are there some, I mean, like, would you have a physicist come to talk to kindergartners or something?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, I think all jobs are appropriate, right? Because we all in our lives may end up, the journey of our work may end us up in that place. What I think might be more challenging. So let's say I'm an actuary for an insurance company, right?
Yes.
That's
yes.
a very abstract concept to young people.
Yeah.
So you would have to really think about showing them, like, I work a lot with numbers. So contextualizing it and being as concrete as you can about the work would be helpful. But I don't know that I would turn anybody away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I would just help them frame out how to bring that understanding at a level that a 5 or 6-year-old could grasp it.
Mm-hmm. And just to follow up on that conversation, why is it so important to expose elementary school students to these careers early?
Yeah, so I think we've had that conversation, Janet, too. Feel pretty strongly that if we're waiting until middle school or high school for students to introduce them to these pathways, to these options of life, that's often too late. So for a student that is still formulating who they are and who they can be, that happens a lot in elementary school. And if it's someone who's met with a lot of negative experiences, by the time they hit 6th, 7th, 8th grade, they've already started to prune some branches of options, right? So they've started to prune off, well, that's not really for me, or I don't think I can be that. And the tree of options that's growing tends to be fairly set in its ways by middle school and high school.
Mm-hmm.
So opening up a young person's ideas to what the possibilities are, I think that needs to happen in elementary school.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because I would guess that if you have students who have not seen this career option, they wouldn't even be able to dream about it, consider it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'll add, Janet, I used to run, I worked at a elementary school in Glen Burnie, and I have no pride when it comes to asking for help for students. So often my first round of getting visitors to come in for my STEM night was just to knock on neighbors' doors. I was at a particular advantage, right? So privilege of my neighborhood was I lived next to a mechanical engineer.
Yes.
Right, I lived next to someone who was a fire chief.
Yes.
So I had in my neighborhood these people, I had realtors, I had designers, I had photographers. I had access to this. It's possible that in some neighborhoods that's not, I don't know this person who is a mechanical engineer. So part of the work that we're doing with these events where we bring people in to talk about these options is closing that opportunity gap, right? My boys had the opportunity to talk on a playground with a mechanical engineer. That doesn't exist on every playground and in every neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. 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 Now, as far as the presentation itself, I guess we have this idea of kind of the framework for the presentation, and you let me know if this is appropriate for elementary school. Okay, the person gives their name, the name of their employer, job title, the education that's needed, a description of the typical day, what they love most about the job. Is this enough, or is this appropriate for elementary school?
Yeah, so again, yes, and like you definitely always want to introduce yourself. Having your name up somewhere is helpful for kids. So if it's, and how you want them to call you. So do you want them to call you Miss Hanks, or do you want them to call you Miss Kris? Those sorts of things. Job title is interesting because again, you're introducing often an audience to something they didn't know existed. Type of education is where I tend to get a little more specific with presenters. So yes, you want to let them know about your degrees and your certificates and all of those things. But for an 8-year-old, that feels very far off and again, abstract. What I tend to ask the visitor to talk a little bit more about is what skills did you have to develop? So if I'm an architect, knowing that you went to Cornell and you have these degrees and you have these certifications, that's interesting and you want to offer that to children. But also letting them know that you drew a lot, right? So you spent a lot of time sketching. which then as an 8-year-old, I can internalize, oh, I like to sketch. Like I like to draw. That's interesting. That catches my interest. That you had to learn how to listen to others really well. So if I, again, architect, I have a client often, I have to listen to their wants and needs, and my design has to be based on the clients. So listening is a skill. Really thinking about those skills, I think, is going to help you connect to young people a little more than listing off your, like a resume that you would do for an adult.
And I'm just remembering your example of the actuary. So the skills needed to be an actuary. Okay.
Right. So working with numbers, we do a lot in elementary school of looking at, you know, data and graphs with students. Actuaries do some of that work, right? So knowing that, like, oh, this thing that my 3rd grade math teacher just did yesterday, where she made me look at this graph and ask these questions, that actually comes up in your job. That's interesting to me. And I can see myself doing that because I have seen myself doing that, right?
Now, to your point about integrating job tasks with what's learned in school, do you think just having the career day or career month is enough, or should there be a concerted effort to kind of integrate careers with the day-to-day curriculum?
I think it needs to happen more than just career day, right? The program that I run that you mentioned, the EEE program, is a project-based learning program. So part of the work we do in project-based learning is finding authentic context for the learning. So the data, again, back to that. Why do I need to know how to read a graph? What's the important part of that? We, in our classrooms, try to very often have like a guest in normal times, not pandemic times, in the room to talk about that, even if it's just to sit down with small groups of students. So it doesn't always have to be a formal presentation. Having someone in the room when the kids are working on soldering wires, who is also an electrician, that's cool, right? So I think it just needs to happen continuously. Career day is nice because you can often get the kids through lots of people. It's easier to organize as an educator, I will offer that. And you tend to get to experience masses of children and masses of careers in one day. Again, as a young person, that can be overwhelming to me though too, right? So this memory of me sitting down with Mr. Mike, who's an electrician, when I was trying to solder my game board, is potentially a little stronger memory for a young person than me cycling through 10 rooms at once and having to like filter through all of these presentations.
Can you tell me a little bit more about this EEE program? I mean, I'm just how you described it, I'm fascinated. What?
Yeah. So we are in elementary schools, we run as part of like a cultural arts program. So in elementary school, students go to art, PE, music, math, media. You remember doing that when you were in school. We are an extra cultural arts, so it's EEE. They go to the classrooms, and in that classroom, they're doing project work. Some of my favorites, so we have a STEM and Society class. One of our projects there is called Helping Hands. The kids learn about prosthetics. We work with a local prosthetics company that's actually out in Linthicum. So we have prostheticians, it's a very hard word to say. And what the students are tasked with is designing a model of a prosthetic hand for a certain client. And we tend to go with like, if it's your client is someone who loves to play baseball, so you're designing this prosthetic hand to be like a catch and throw sort of adaptation. We go to Dankmeyer's, the corporation we work with there, we partner with there, we talk about their work. They come into the classrooms, the kids design, they use math skills, they use listening skills, they sketch, they write about their work. So it's a program designed to give context to what is often isolated skills in the school day. We try to combine them all and apply them to a situation.
All students offered this opportunity to participate in the EEE program?
Yes, ma'am. So when I was at Woodside, it was the school of about 320. I saw every class in that building for 1 hour a week. So every child participated. It's not a special or a GT or a club. It's an opportunity for all children to engage in that work.
And did you see direct benefits from having the children participate in this? Because I guess the reason I ask this is I spent a lot of time looking at the Maryland Department of Education school report cards. I mean, everything is just there's so much information out there now.
Right.
So does this program help with proficiencies in math and language arts and all those types of things?
Yes. Yes, and that's my typical answer. Yes, and the challenge. So if you're looking at the Maryland State Report Card, the data there is based off, often part of it is based off of a standardized test. Yeah. I think we're in this MCAP is the current one that's out there. Mm-hmm. What those tests do not currently measure are creativity, collaboration, critical thinking. We have not yet found a great way on a standardized test to measure those skills that are often these skills that I need to do a job. So what we might not see is a jump in a math score for a third grader, because that third grade math test measures very finite micro standards. So the ability to add and subtract. Now we do have some data that shows in our Title I schools, so schools that are of need, that have high rates of poverty in the families that live in the area, that those schools do achieve higher scores on those tests overall than our non-EEE schools, which are not yet in all of the schools. Anecdotally, if you walked into a classroom, any of my classrooms, which you're completely invited to do this fall, what you will see is students excited about learning. So they're often very noisy classrooms. There's often a lot of student talk versus teacher talk, students listen. One of my favorites is when I walk into the room and you have to look for the teacher, right? Yeah. Because the teacher is somewhere on the floor building like a hand out of Legos with a kid. And it's really a very student-centered, student-run classroom. And I've had lots of kids come back. I just had one who graduated from a STEM high school that said, like, you're like that class is the reason why I chose this pathway. I had another young girl who wants to be a teacher and just commented on like that class was the reason that I felt like I was capable of doing work, right? I was capable. It's a very asset-based space. So students can come at it from what they're good at and shine.
Oh, that is wonderful. Now, is this available for all grade levels in elementary school, or is it certain grade levels?
We do pre-K through 5.
Whoa, that's
so
wonderful.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. Pre-K will make you sweat a little bit.
Yeah, wonderful.
Because they're super excited and interested and curious about everything. So it's different work sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, so is this kind of like a pilot program? You mentioned that it's not in all the schools just yet.
Correct. We're in our 7th year right now. We open in a new set of schools every year for 7 years. And I think we anticipate being in all of the elementary schools in Anne Arundel County within the next 3 years. We'll be done. We'll be full rollout.
Wonderful. Congratulations on that. Thanks. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Now, are there any, I think we've kind of covered it, but I want to ask the questions. Should the discussion topics be adjusted based on grade level? And I think we've already kind of talked on that, but if there's more that you think we need to have on that, just let me know.
Somewhat. So we just mentioned pre-K students, right? So if you're invited to go into a pre-K class, I do think you have to think about how to make this a very concrete, imaginable piece of work, right? One of the things I often tell our visitors, if they're presenting, is to bring stuff. And there is nothing that's not interesting to an elementary school student, right? So the pilot who came in, right, he brought a GPS system that we were actually working with handheld GPSs at the time. And he showed that the same satellites we were connecting with on our GPS units were the same satellites he was using. I've had architects come in and bring blueprints. Kids will totally like eat that up. Any sort of tool that you might have, kids are interested in getting their hands on things or seeing, if they're not allowed to touch it, rolling out a set of blueprints, super fascinating, and will help the kids, again, imagine in a better way than if you're just sort of talking at them. So anything that you can bring in. The fire chief who came in brought in his tanks, he brought in the uniform, he brought in the helmet. The kids got to touch it. They asked really interesting questions about the materials because they hadn't actually touched the uniform before. So anything that you can bring that's tactile, that they can touch, and that will get them curious, will definitely make it a much more engaging, rewarding time.
And I think that answers the next question that I had was, what are the strategies or tools to engage students? So bring things you can touch, do it in chunks, or the presentation time. Talk about the skills rather than your credentials. I mean, it's good to share, but focus on the skills needed for these jobs. Anything else there?
The last one, and this is possibly personal taste, but often an adult will plan for like a Q&A, like question and answer at the end. With an adult crowd, that works better, because even if you ask a question, Janet, that's not my question, I typically as an adult will frame that like, I'll be interested in what you asked and what the presenter is saying. With a 6, 7, 8-year-old, I'm waiting just for my question to be asked. And even if it's the same as yours, like sometimes the young person will tune out, right? Until it's my turn. What I often would do as the teacher in the room was to have the kids, if they were old enough to write, that they would write their questions on index cards. And then I could look for patterns, right? So here's a group of kids that are asking about what does it look like on a typical day? Or what's the biggest building you've ever, if it's an architect, what's the biggest building you've ever designed, right? If you are the presenter and the teacher hasn't done that ahead of time, maybe just bring some index cards or sticky notes, right? And sort of collect those. That helps with engaging the whole crowd of young people a little better than the one question at a time where I'm just waiting for my turn. So as a presenter, if I can say, oh, I see a lot of people are asking about how it feels to be close to a fire. Let me tell you a little bit about that. Let me show you a picture of that. So anything that you can do to kind of gather that and look for trends so that you're speaking to the whole group tends to go better with young people.
And are you saying it's best to incorporate those answers in the presentation rather than waiting to the end?
If you can, and they're gonna raise their hands, right? They're young people. They're developmentally at a stage where I am. This is me. This is my world. So they will raise their hand. They will ask you how much you make. That's one of those questions. They will tell you about their new shoes, right? That's just how they are, and that's fun. So there's no reason why you can't do that. I've just seen that Q&A sort of get to like a very fidgety place for a group of kids. And often it's at the end too, right? So they've had to listen for 30 minutes and then you're doing sort of questions one at a time. That can get kind of fidgety unless you sort of planned for, lots of students are wondering about this. Let me tell you a little bit about.
And is there movement within that 30 minutes? Or are the students sitting the whole 30 minutes?
I would highly recommend it, right? So again, an 8-year-old sitting crisscross applesauce on a carpet for 30 minutes is gonna like go wrong very quickly. If they're at their desks, even they'll get kind of fidgety. I have also done where the presenter, so Janet, if you're coming in to talk about the work you do, you're at a table and I cycle through little groups of 6 to 8. Right, so you're there with your artifacts, you're there with your photos, and you meet for like 10-minute chunks with small groups of students. That's another way to imagine it, that if the teacher's not doing that, you might want to ask to do.
So what are the other students doing while you're talking to them?
Yeah, so I definitely have had an electrician come in and they had plans. So at one table, they were just allowed to look at like the schematics. I think that's the right word. At one table, they were just looking at the schematics, right? At another table, we were looking at photos, like of wires and things, or I had out other things that they could touch. And then at one table, they were there meeting with the person who came in to visit and talk about their career.
So are there adults at these other tables where
Yeah, so like the teacher would be at one, and there's typically one in a classroom with a group of 8. You can have one that's an independent station where the kids are just like touching or doing it.
Okay. Now, what should the students gain from this experience? What do you hope once a presenter has completed their presentation that the student takes away from this encounter?
I think back to our previous conversation a little bit is helping them to imagine themselves in this role. So even if it's not my current dream, young people, again, if I haven't had the opportunity to imagine all of these things, I've thought of like doctor, nurse, community helpers, like people that I've come across. So this is a thing that I'm like, oh, I didn't know that was a job. I didn't know that my love of art could lead to this really cool job where my art is used to design buildings. That's cool. Even if it's not their dream job, right? Understanding that this is a possibility. And then the second one is really helping them to see, again, the skills that I'm learning every day in school, that they have a purpose. Whether that's a math skill or a reading skill or asking good questions in science. So architects wouldn't need to ask really good questions. So those sorts of things, helping them see the purpose in the daily learning that they're experiencing.
Yeah, the purpose. And that is the question that you hear so often. Why do I have to?
Why do I have to learn this? Yep. Why do I need to know this? Yeah.
Now, Kris, are there any questions that I have not asked that you think would be helpful for career day speakers to know?
I think you covered most of them. The last thing I might offer up that's interesting for students is more of a journey story. I had one of my teachers one year, instead of career day, did journey day. So everyone who came in to talk, instead of talking about my job now, they got there, right? But they talked about what was it along my life, the pathway, all of these different choices that landed me in this moment. I think that's also interesting to young people. For some, it's a very direct path, right? I graduated high school, I went to college, I got my bachelor's in computer science, I got my master's in big data, right? So for some people, that's a very direct path. For others, it took me 10 years to get my bachelor's. I'm now working on my second master's, but I didn't know what I wanted to be, even at 18 or 19. I think that's comforting too, to know that you can try out different things and experience different parts of life and eventually land somewhere. We had on that journey day, we had someone who was a lawyer who told a very interesting story. That wasn't his original dream, and really talked about all of the things he tried before he found this place that was an alignment of all his talents and skills and passions.
I know that this is the program that you're a part of is an elementary school program. Are there plans to expand the concept to middle school, or will it always be an elementary school type program?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's a short answer. Anne Arundel County is committed to finishing it in elementary schools. There are threads of, project-based learning itself, this idea that I learn content by solving a challenge or a problem. We have threads of that in middle school and high school. Very often in our magnet programs, we have our performing visual arts and we have STEM programs. You'll see that kind of learning, that type of approach to teaching and learning, that's showing up in middle school and high school.
And the reason I asked the question, and I believe the importance of exposing students to a variety of careers early. Elementary school is optimal. And I think having an opportunity to get exposure to as many careers as possible will
Mhm.
help when students graduate from high school. They've been exposed to many, so that it's helpful in making that decision. Maybe, do I need to go to college? Do I need to just go do I need to go to community college? Am I going to a technical school? Because college is expensive now.
Absolutely.
I marvel at how
Yeah.
much it costs now. And I
Yeah.
guess when I went to college, maybe, that was a time for you to do a whole bunch of exploration.
Mhm.
But
Yeah. I think, I don't know if I'm talking to the career professionals, Janet, in this context, but also I love that idea that, again, there's lots of different tracks, lots of different ways I can get to this spot that I might land in. Um, as many different ways that you can introduce kids to, like, there's lots of different pathways to get there. There's lots of ways to use what you're good at and what you're interested in.
Mhm.
I think our tendency is to look for this multi-degreed person, right? So this electrical engineer, which is awesome. If you can find that person who works at NASA, great, bring him in. What I did find sometimes was there was just a dad who was there was a dad who was an electrician, and he came in to work with the kids, and and not as a speaker, not as a stand-up speaker, because he was uncomfortable with that, but he just worked at a station with the kids. They loved it, and
Yeah.
he loved it, right?
Yeah.
I have an arts and humanities thread where the kids often do work with textiles, so handwork, sewing, or those sorts of things. There are lots of moms and grandmas, and sometimes dads, who like to knit or sew. They would come in to work with the kids. So there are also, in addition to careers, sometimes there are passions. There are gardeners in your community, people who like to garden, that want to come in and work with kids. So seeing these as careers, but also seeing them as just possibilities to my life.
Yeah.
These are other ways to find happiness and value and joy in my world.
Yeah.
That's a fun thing to explore too.
Absolutely. Kris, this has just been a fantastic conversation. Thank
Yes.
you so much for what you do, and thank you for sharing this um, with future Career Day speakers or Career Day uh, encounters that people may have, so that we can enrich the lives of elementary school students. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you, Janet. Thanks for the work that you do. And to anyone who's offering to enter a classroom, their impact on students is huge. So just that 30 minutes can really actually help a young person imagine their world in a very different way. So we appreciate anyone who's willing to come in and work with young humans.
Now, just for anybody who sees this and wants to reach out to you,
Oh, yeah.
is there contact information that you might want to share?
Absolutely. So it's, my name is Kris Hanks. So my email is khanks, like Tom Hanks, at aacps.org. So yes, anytime.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Kris, thank you.
You're welcome, Janet. Thank you for all the work you're doing.
Thank you so much.